A group of Illinois state lawmakers are expected to weigh in on the State Department of Corrections plan to close and rebuild 2 prisons. Last night, members of the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability heard from IDOC leaders and prison employees on the plan to close both Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill and Logan Correctional Center in Lincoln. The state's main women's prison for medium and maximum security inmates. Both would be rebuilt on available land on the Stateville campus.
This is not just a matter of preference, but a necessary step to ensure safety, efficiency, and the fulfillment of our rehabilitative mission.
The union representing IDOC employees opposes the plan, arguing it will force workers to transfer to facilities as far as 65 miles from Stateville and 90 miles from Logan.